Hey peeps, this is my new motor. I just bought this earlier on today. It's a Honda CBR900RR Fire Blade engine, 893cc from 1994. Bought it off eBay, off a professional bike breaker. Apparently 40,000 miles, although I've not actually seen the clocks, but this is it. So this is the motor that I've been planning to buy for about a week, and I've just been down and got it today. Seems fairly decent condition. It's not really a much sign of any sign of any fluid leaks or anything. Seems not too bad. Obviously, because it's a bike engine, I can't put a spanner on the end of the crank and see if it turns over, but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start work on it tomorrow. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the engine cases off. I'm gonna take the cam cover off, have a look at the cams and the tappets and that. I'll take off the clutch cover and the cover on the end of the crank, this one, and I'll take off the starter cover and have a look in there. And I might also take off the sump, turn the engine upside down and take the sump off, have a look at the crank and the bottom of the pistons and that, and then plan is put a spanner on the end of the crank and check the engine turns. The guy says the bike was running when it was brought into their shop. Excuse me. So assuming that he's honest, which he seemed reasonably reputable, then the engine should be running fine, hopefully. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the compression as well. So it's got spark plugs in it at the moment, so obviously they'll have to come out and get replaced anyway. So I'll be getting new spark plugs, new engine oil, new antifreeze. I'll check the valve clearances as well. I've got the cam cover off. Check the valve clearances, check the compression, check that it turns over fine. Have a look at the clutch, have a look at the pistons, con rods, crankshaft, just make sure everything looks kind of straight and in reasonable condition. I did check the oil. Obviously there's no oil in it, the oil's been drained out for it to be transported, but what I did was I took this out. It's actually got a dipstick rather than a sight glass on the Fire Blade, which I quite like because sight glasses are a pain. There's not really, there was a wee tiny drop of oil on there, and I just kind of rubbed it between my fingers, and I got a wee bit from, if you just stick your finger in there, there's just a wee kind of film, whoops, got the washer, there's a wee kind of film of oil on there, and if I rub it between my fingers, there's no feeling of any kind of grit or anything, so I guess that's a sign that the engine's in a reasonable state, I would say. But you know, that's kind of a rule of thumb, obviously. So what's included with the engine? Well, the clutch, obviously, gearbox, there's a starter motor on it. It's the starter motor there. There's some kind of wiring and hoses and things, but I might replace these wires and hoses and whatnot. We'll see how it goes. That wire looks like there's been some kind of DIY work done on it at some point, to be honest, which is a little bit concerning. I suppose you could say that's a bit concerning, but you know, it's just a motor, isn't it? So it's all going to get kind of stripped and done up anyway. I'm not going to completely rebuild it, but like I say, I'm going to check the compression, I'm going to check the valve clearances, I'm going to have all the engine cases off and have a look inside and see what kind of state it's in. Comes with a starter as well. That's the alternator on that end. I assume it is on most bikes. There's a big fat cable coming out of it, so I think that's the alternator. So that case will come off, and usually when you take the case off, it brings the starter with it, so I'll have a look at the starter while I'm at it. And the other part of the alternator, I can't think what that's called, like the magnetic bit that's on the end of the crankshaft. Can't think of the name of that. There's a name for it. If anyone knows the name for that, put it in the comments, please. Don't really see what could be wrong with that. It's just kind of what it is. It's not really going to wear. It's got the engine mounting. So the engine mountings here, the rear engine mountings. I can't get there just now with one hand, but it's a rubber engine mounting goes in there, and the same on that side. It's like a steel sleeve with a kind of rubber around it, so that kind of like cuts the vibration, stops the vibration going in the chassis. Then there's that bit there which is like a sleeve that goes through that bit, and then there's like a steel rod that goes through there, which I got with the chassis. There's another mounting down there. This mounting doesn't seem to have any bits with it, but that one doesn't seem to have rubber mountings anyway, so maybe the rubber mountings are in the chassis. I don't know, I haven't really looked properly yet. But to make sure the motor goes in, I have measured between all the mountings. This, from that mounting, there's like one engine bolt on that side of the block, and there's one that side, and there's also one on the cylinder head, and they measure, I think it's about 38 centimetres, or was it 39? I think it's 39 centimetres from there to there. That's like the width of the engine. And that one I measured there, that's 8 centimetres. And if you look at the chassis, I measured the mountings on the chassis is 8 centimetres from there to there, and 38 from there to there. I think it was 39. I can't remember if it was 39 or it was 38, but it was the same on the chassis as it is on the engine. And then I measured from there down to the bottom, and that's something like 34 centimetres, I think. So basically the upshot of that is, although that's a 1992 Fire Blade chassis, and that's a 1994 Fire Blade engine, as far as I can tell, without actually putting it in the chassis, it should bolt straight in and everything should line up as far as I can tell. Because technically that's a slightly different model. That was like the facelift. That was the 92 was the original Fire Blade, like the very first Fire Blade that came out was in 1992. So the chassis is from an original one, and then the 1994 was like the facelift Fire Blade. But it was only really the styling that they changed, as far as I can tell. The motor and that's all the same. So the motor should go straight in to the chassis. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start working it tomorrow. I'm going to take off all the hoses and all the wires and whatnot, and then I'm going to give it a clean up. What I'll do is I'll put some excuse me, get some polythene, or I don't know, some duct tape or something, and cover over these, because obviously I don't want to get dirt into the engine when I'm cleaning it. Same with the exhaust ports. I'll have to put something over the exhaust ports, or maybe just like screw up a bit of newspaper and just stuff it in, something like that, just to stop dirt from going in. And it's probably the same with these as well. Well, they've still got the spark plugs in, so that'll stop dirt going into the engine, but I might just cover them anyway, just to, you know, just for good measure. And then just there's kind of loose dirt on it on the front. It's kind of it's a bit grubby, so I'll probably just clean that up with a wire brush. Just give it a scrub with a wire brush to start off, just to get the loose dirt off. And then it's not too bad for kind of grease and oil and that. There's a bit of oil where they drained. There's a bit of oil in the sump. I can't remember where it was, where they drained the oil out. I think it's just that oil that was spilt. There's a bit of grease around the sprocket. That's the sprocket. I think it must be in neutral, because that turns quite easily. I think that's just turning the shafts in the gearbox, or one of the shafts in the gearbox, I would say, because if it was in gear it wouldn't turn, I guess. Anyway, that's that. It doesn't really matter. So this bit around the sprocket is all pretty greasy, obviously because it's picked up all the chain grease over the years, so that'll need a really good scrub up with white spirit to get that off. So I'm going to start on that tomorrow. These engine cases, that engine case is quite scabby. The paint's all peeling, but that's fine because it's going to get painted anyway. Everything's going to get painted on it. These covers, I think the bike must have been dropped at some point, because if you look at that, you can see it's ground down across the bottom there, which is exactly the bit that will go down on the road if somebody came off the bike. So somebody's obviously come off this bike at some point, I would say. If you look at the clutch cover as well, there's a bit of a grind there. I don't think it would be a really high speed get off, because generally with these clutch covers and engine cases in general, if you come off a bike at like 50-60 mile an hour, and I know this because I've come off a bike at 50 miles an hour myself, and it usually goes right through this bit. Usually it'll grind right through it if that goes down on the tarmac at sort of 50 mile an hour. So the fact that that's just got a wee bit of a graze on it and a bit on there, I would say that's probably somebody's come off at quite low speed, like, I don't know, maybe 20-30 mile an hour or something. I don't know, it's difficult to say really, but it doesn't really matter too much anyway, because you know, a crash doesn't really affect the engine that much, or I don't think it does anyway. If anyone knows differently, feel free to put something in the comments. This bit here as well, that's the cam chain tensioner. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. Somebody seems to have Loctite it. It's got it's been drilled there, and somebody's put wire around it, so I don't know what the story is with that. I mean, sometimes they say that if something's been Loctite it means it's been raced, but there's nothing else is Loctite, none of the other bolts are, so I don't know. Again, if anyone's got any ideas on that, put something in the comments please. So that's basically my engine. All these hoses are going to come off, radiator hoses. These hoses are actually not too bad condition. I could probably reuse these, I think, but I don't know. I might just put on some, like, we'll see how the budget goes. If I can afford it, I'd like to put on some like silicone hoses or that, but if the budget's a bit tight, I'll maybe just stick with these hoses. That's, I think, that's the radiator top hose, that's the radiator bottom hose. They're both quite good condition. That one there, I think, is the one that goes to the expansion tank, because that comes from the thermostat on the back. So that goes up to the expansion tank, and I'd say, from the fact that that's cut at an angle, that's just been cut. I think when they've been taking the engine out of the bike, they probably just hacked that with a Stanley knife by the look of it. That's the crank breather. That doesn't seem too bad condition either. I can probably reuse that, maybe, or maybe I'll just replace it. Again, we'll see how the budget goes. That hose there, I'm not too sure what that is, to be honest. It's obviously something to do with cooling, because it goes down onto the water pump. That's the water pump down in there. I'm pretty sure that's, well, it must be the water pump, because it's got the two hoses. One the radiator bottom hose goes onto that, and there's another hose that goes onto like the front of the block, like that one there. So I think it takes the water from the bottom of the radiator and then pumps it up into the block. I notice also there's a hose going down to the oil filter, actually from the cooling system. So I guess that means that the oil must be cooled by the coolant as well. I don't know. Again, I can maybe figure some of this stuff out from the Haynes manual. Ideally what I'd like to do is replace all the hoses and just have complete new hoses on the whole engine and the whole bike, but we'll have to, I don't know, we'll see. What else? I'm not sure what this bit is. I think that must be another engine mount or something, I'm not too sure actually. Something kind of sticking out the side there, it's like a shaft. It doesn't turn. I think that must be kind of an engine mounting or something, I'm not really sure. again, we'll have a look at the Haynes manual, see, figure everything out. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve, I think, building this. So, but there we go. So I've now got an engine and a chassis and a swing arm, subframe, forks, some wheels, shock, and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. So that's the start. So the first thing really is to get that engine cleaned up, and after that, like I say, give it a good check over. Anyway, that's it. I've rambled off on enough now, so thanks for watching.